Hello, hello, and welcome to the Brighteye Edtech Startup Festival. Thank you all for joining. Today is the ESG Impact and Evidence Day, as we have reached day 4 of this week, filled with content and learning. This morning, we discussed how to measure your startup's impact. The session was recorded and will be shared, as will this one, when we now will be exploring behavioral insights and how it can be applied to boost your impact. My name is Hege, and I'm Head of Community at Brighteye Ventures. We are the most active EdTech-focused VC fund in Europe, with interest spanning the sector from the early years to lifelong learning and everywhere in between. We partner with companies across Europe in your early stages, supporting you in pre-seed, seed, and Series A with both investment and thematic support, where we feel like we can be most helpful. So the inspiration for this festival came from that work. We're very proud to present some of the best experts in the industry contributing this week with their knowledge and experience on a number of topics relevant to building and growing your startups. And as I said, now reaching day 4. We hope there will also be some helpful conversations and connections made by all of you. Please feel free to post your questions and comments to our speakers in the chat. And speaking of speakers, our speakers this afternoon, I'm proud to share are Lal Cherry Singh from Behavioural Insights team, Kylie Sobel of Duolingo, Saru Ranjan from StudyStream, and Nicole Bratz from TeachFX, the last two part of the Brighteye family. Leading us through the session, it is with great pleasure I introduce Alex Salin of EdTech Insiders. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Hege. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is a really exciting session about a really interesting topic that I think doesn't get talked about nearly enough in EdTech. So I'm really excited to kick it off and get started. The way this is going to work is we're going to start with 2 keynote speakers who are both amazing. I'll introduce each one. They'll talk for about 13 to 15 minutes each, and then we'll open up as a panel for every speaker in the group. So first off, I'd love to introduce Lal Cherry Singh. He's a senior advisor at the Behavioural Insights team. He leads the schools portfolio, and he's worked with EdTech platforms on, tutoring projects, attendance projects, engagement projects, gender balance, teacher recruitment, teacher well-being, all sorts of really compelling and important issues in education. He's also worked with the central government in the Cabinet Office, Department of Business, and has taught both economics and politics at the A level. So let's start with Lal Cherry Singh. Lal, I don't know if you have slides, but take it away. And everybody feel free to put questions in the chat and we will come around to them.
Super, thanks for the introduction, Alex. I'll just attempt to pull up my slides, okay, for you all. Can you see those all right? Awesome. So yeah, thanks so much for the invitation to speak about these topics around how behavioral insights can be applied to EdTech. It's something that I'm super passionate about. I think there's really great potential to do this. So excited to share some thoughts with you all today. So I'm gonna start off with something a little interactive, and I can see the video, so I will know if people don't do this. If everyone could put their hands up to start with, and then I'll ask you to put your hand down when you know the answer to the question, which is about to flash up. So what is 2 times 2? And we should probably see hands go down quite quickly for that one. And hands up again now. And same as before, so I'm going to flash a question up and hands down when you know the answer. What is 24 times 17? And usually this takes people a little bit longer. Maybe some people are running a maths EdTech platform, maybe a bit faster. But the point is not a maths quiz, but just to highlight the difference between those 2 calculations. For most of us, unless you're a maths genius, those 2 things will feel quite different. And this is just a useful way to illustrate System 1 and System 2, which some of you might be familiar with. Incredible work by Daniel Kahneman, who received the Nobel Prize for this kind of outline around System 1 and System 2. So I'll just chat through it quickly. So System 1, sometimes called FAST, is the kind of thinking that we're able to rely on for something as simple as 2 times 2. And it's also what we would typically use for our daily commute, or a journey that you make super regularly. You know, those days when you make it to the office and you almost can't really remember how you got there because you can do it on autopilot because it's a journey that you've done so often. In contrast, system 2, sometimes called slow, is the kind of thinking which most of us will need to rely on to perform a calculation like 24 times 17. It's also anyone who's ever been to Tokyo and not a local of Tokyo. The Tokyo transport system is definitely a system 2 requirement network. So, you know, when you're somewhere unfamiliar, we'll need to use system 2. So system 2 kind of sounds great, but it's very exhausting to be using that all the time. So it's actually really great that we've got system 1. But a slight wrinkle is that when we're in a system 1 state, which we might be a lot of the time, which lots of your users might be a lot of the time, everyone's very busy, we're quite prone to bias. And a challenge which is posed for government and policymakers and anyone designing any kind of communication or system for users to interact with is that we're always thinking really carefully about how we're designing that. We're using our system 2 brains to design it. And it can sometimes be easy to forget that the people on the other end might not be in that system 2 space with us. They might be in this system 1, much more prone to bias space. And that's where behavioral insights and some of the interventions, which I'm going to give a flavor of today, can be useful for encouraging people to take actions that are desirable for them and for whatever kind of learning platform you're trying to put forward. So as the Behavioural Insights team, and we're one of the first organizations set up what was at that point a growing field to various challenges. And this is how we see the field. So we take evidence about behaviour from both academia and past research projects that we've run. We apply that to a number of different practical challenges. I've always worked in education. And then wherever we can, we robustly evaluate our ideas to see what works and what doesn't work as well, which is just as important. And wherever possible, we try and do that using a randomized controlled trial. But there are times where that's not possible as well. And then we try and go for whatever is pragmatic and practical. So I wanted to give you a little flavor of some work that we've done with an EdTech organization recently, and also introduce our EAST framework. So the next slide is basically like if you take one thing from this talk, it's the next slide coming up now. So if you're trying to encourage someone to do something on an EdTech platform, I would encourage you to make that behavior as easy as possible for them to do, to make it attractive, to make it social, and to make it timely. And the reason we've got easy in a different color, and this is based off something that Richard Thaler, who also won a Nobel Prize for his work, has said, if you can do anything at all, just make it easy for people to take the actions that you want them to take, for people to perform the behavior that you would like them to. And actually the couple of examples that I'm going to talk through today are all about making it as easy as possible. So as I kind of said at the start, I think there's great potential to use behavioral insights with the kind of innovative EdTech products that I know lots of you will be developing and running to improve outcomes on those products. I think it's, as Alex was saying as well, an area of enormous potential. And we were fortunate enough to work with Hegarty Maths right after school closures in the UK, so right at the start of the pandemic. And we kicked off this work because we obviously recognized with lots of schools shifting to online learning, usage of EdTech platforms was going to increase, and how learning happened on those platforms became even more important. And I think this is carrying on kind of through this post-pandemic era as well. So the first thing we worked on with Hegarty Maths was looking at what happens when a student gets a question wrong on their platform. And this was essentially the before element. So what we what happened if a student got a question wrong? You would see this little pop-up box that we've got on the slide, and the student was asked, check your answers sensible. And we noticed that there was this get help button, which is kind of hidden over here. And we spoke to Colin Hegarty, who's kind of the brainchild of that whole platform. And we said, is that an important feature? And he said, yeah, that's the heart of the platform. Those video explanations are what lots of people love. That's what we've put so much energy into. And so we felt there was quite a bit of friction to go from clicking OK over here to then saying get help. And that if it really was the case that these videos were so important, we might be able to redesign this to encourage a bit more video watch. So because of the large number of users that Hegarty Maths had, we were actually able to test out 4 different prompts, which I think is, if you're building up towards a significant number of users of your product, it's something that's really nice about applying behavioral insights in this context, because lots of my other work involves trying to do stuff in schools, and I have to recruit hundreds of schools, and it's very exhausting. Whereas this experiment was run pretty quickly. So we were interested in trying out a few different things. So some of you who'll be a bit familiar with behavioral insights won't be surprised to see a social norms kind of flavor message here. We've also got a relatable messenger kind of message that, in more of a student voice, but these were all kind of different techniques to try and encourage people to click that get help button. So I'll show you what happened when we made this change, and what was consistent across all of them was bringing get help right into this pop-up. So what we can see is that change more than doubled video watch. So the before is the control, and then we had our 4 treatments. There wasn't a huge amount of difference between those treatments. So I think a lot of the effect was just driven by the removal of that friction to go and find that button, making it really easy to click on it. So this is great. We were pretty excited, but increasing the video watch wouldn't really mean anything if there was then kind of no change to how students performed on these quizzes. And after getting a question wrong, all students would get a second attempt. So we were really interested to see, okay, what will happen to second attempt accuracy? And so, yeah, that was the video watch. Because their numbers are so huge, big impact. In terms of the accuracy second attempts, we can see that this improved. Not by a massive amount, but by a statistically significant amount due to the large number of users. So that's encouraging for the theory of change of this platform, that watching more videos seems to help students do better on their second attempts. Then we wondered, and we built this into the start and the kind of initial setup of the experiment, whether students would basically learn that watching the videos was a good idea. And if we think that that might happen, we could maybe expect their first answer accuracy to improve as well. And indeed, that is what we saw, that their first accuracy on future first attempts did improve a little bit, which is really nice. So yeah, that was the first bit of work that we did with Hegarty Maths, and I think really just highlights the importance of thinking about what are the key features of your platform, what do you really want people to do and engage with, and how can you make it really easy for them to take those actions. And so the second little project and trial that we ran with them was thinking all about defaults. And defaults are one of the most robust behavioral insights, so super powerful. We all have these phones which are infinitely customizable, but most of us will stick with the default settings. So exceptionally powerful to think about what's the default settings within your platform. And we were speaking to Hegarty Maths about the different features that they had, and they were thinking about the shift to remote learning for students, and they built this memory feature which was grounded in retrieval practice that they thought would be really useful for students at this time. They put a lot of energy and investment into it, and we were looking at their usage figures, and the feature wasn't being used much at all, which is maybe a challenge that some of you can relate to. You build something that you think is great, and then not that many people are actually using it. And what we could see is that the teachers had to actively set a weekly goal for their class in terms of the number of memory tasks they wanted them to complete. So if the teacher did nothing, the weekly goal would be 0, which is potentially quite an unhelpful default. So what we spoke to them about was, would they be happy with flipping the default and instead making a default of 1 for all teachers, which they then totally had the freedom to customize and change to a higher goal or take it back to 0, but just shift that default to 1. They agreed they'd like to test it out. Because this was a big kind of structural change on the website, it was too complicated for us to run it as a randomized control trial. So instead, we just did a pre-post. So I'm going to show you the results of that. I think they are quite striking, even though the kind of standard of evidence is a little bit lower. So this is kind of self-explanatory. The first chart on the left-hand side, we switched the default to more students having this goal. We basically turned this on. Not very many people turned it off, which is sort of what you would expect, because people very much do go with the default. What we were more interested in was, would this simple kind of flipping of the default actually lead to more students doing these memory quizzes? And what we could see is that, yes, it spiked up use of the memory feature, which Hegarty Maths were really happy about. Now, you can probably notice it's starting to tail off towards the end. We think that's because it was the end of term at the time when we were running this. So that last week, the last 2 weeks are moving towards the end of term. But it's also, that's slightly the downside of the fact that we could only run a pre-post test here. So again, I think, the takeaway from this example is to think really carefully about what are the default settings on your platform or your product. Are there any places where you could actually flip that default and have more of your users doing what you would like them to do? So those are the 2 examples that I wanted to chat through with you today. If you scan that code, or if you Google applying behavioral insights in EdTech, an incomplete guide, we've written up a document on this work. There was a third trial that we ran as well, and it includes a lot more detail than I was able to go into today. And then my final behavioral insight is that I've made it very easy for you to get in touch with me. So if you scan that QR code, it'll pull up an automatically generated email if you'd like to stay in touch with our work. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll look forward to your questions later on.
Lovely. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lal Cherry Singh. Really, really interesting insights into and practical results in how to do behavioral studies that have long tail downstream effects. Fantastic. We have one question that we will get around to a little bit later in the chat from Mega. Appreciate the question. But next up, we have Dr. Kylie Sobel, who is a senior user experience researcher at Duolingo, the very well-known language learning edtech company. She does research with kids and parents for Duolingo ABC. That's the Duolingo's free English literacy learning app for kids. Kylie came from the Joan Gans Cooney Center, which is the independent research and innovation lab hosted at Sesame Workshop. Joan Gans Cooney was the founder of Sesame Street and Sesame Workshop. Kylie has conducted integrative research about kids and families throughout her career in disability, accessibility, collaborative play, many subjects, and she completed her PhD in human-centered design and engineering at the University of Washington. She's also worked with Microsoft. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Dr. Kylie Sobel.
Thanks, Alex. All right, let's get to sharing my screen here. Okay. Can we all see it? Does it look right? Okay, cool. This is always the first step. All righty. Okay. So thank you all for having me today. I'm really excited to talk to you about how UX research can help you all EdTech startups boost your impact even further. So like Alex mentioned, if you haven't heard of the company Duolingo before, it's most known for its language learning application, which has over 500 million registered users, and over 13 million use the app on a daily basis. With that many users, I'm sure it's no surprise that Duolingo has the world's largest collection of language learning data at its fingertips, which allows us, a research team of experts in AI and machine learning, data science, learning analytics, linguistics, psychometrics, and UX research to uncover new insights about the nature of language and learning and apply existing theories at an incredibly large scale. At Duolingo, we really do measure and test everything so we can make data-informed product decisions, both big and small. And that includes running hundreds of experiments or A/B tests every year. And so I really encourage you all to check out the Duolingo blog to learn more about the many ways we've used these sorts of behavioral insights to learn about our users and improve the Duolingo language learning app. But I'm not here to talk about A/B tests, because what if you don't have data from millions of users like Duolingo? So running experiments and gathering metrics data doesn't yield significant results. Or what if you do have quantitative behavioral data, but it doesn't show you a clear pattern, or you don't understand why the data is trending a certain way, and you want to alleviate an issue that you're seeing or capitalize on that positive data trend? Or what if you want to try something new or different or potentially risky that may take resources like time, energy, and money? And because building out products and running experiments is very expensive, you might want to understand how users act or interact or think and feel before going all in. You might even want to consider many potential solutions before building out a final one. Well, among these and many other scenarios, that's where user experience research, or UXR, comes in. So UXR is really a key partner to the other research functions at Duolingo and a complement to the behavioral insights gleaned from quantitative research. And we in UXR at Duolingo reach our learners in creative ways, ground the product in true human experience, and ultimately champion high impact research that leads to stronger outcomes than if we went straight to building and large scale testing right away. We on the UXR team, we really build out a deep understanding of the behaviors, needs, and attitudes and motivations of our learners. And this deep understanding leads to actionable insights that allow us to make better business and product decisions. So how do we gather these insights and when? While there are a lot of different frameworks to talk about UXR methods, I thought it'd be appropriate, since I was coming after Lal, to show how UXR fits into the behavioral insights team methodology. So as you might already know, this methodology involves 4 basic iterative stages. You start by defining the problem you want to solve, the outcomes you're trying to change. Then you work to understand the context of the problem, which includes qualitative, in-depth fieldwork. This fieldwork, along with the literature, helps the team build an intervention, which should be co-designed with stakeholders involved in the issue at some level. And the final stage is to test, learn, and adapt, primarily and ideally through randomized control trials to produce evidence-based recommendations for changes and proof of what works and doesn't work. And these aren't linear stages. You can move back and forth between them. So hopefully I did that justice. And so it might be obvious that UXR is already embedded or can be further embedded into this iterative process. Alongside your team's expertise and experience, foundational or discovery research can help you figure out what problems there are to solve that are meaningful to the people who they affect. And this research could help you even define what some of the outcomes could be from a learner's first perspectives, like according to learners' values, wants, and needs. Ethnographic and other UXR methods are part of understanding the context of the problem further. And building interventions can involve co-design, which is a way to research through the design process, and can utilize other generative research methods like iterative product testing, which I'll come back to. And part of the test, learn, and adapt stage can involve evaluative product testing to determine in parallel how well something is working from a usability, enjoyability, attitudinal, and even learning standpoint alongside other quantitative experiments, or can help to explain the why of those experiments. And while every stage is important, and of course exciting to me as a UX researcher, I think this third stage, when developing EdTech, can often be underutilized as a place for when UX research can really raise our return on investment when it comes to building interventions and products before we do large scale quantitative testing. So in particular, here's where concept testing can be especially generative and lead to better designs and more grounded understanding of people and their values and ultimately boosting impact. So if you aren't familiar, concept testing is the exploration of multiple design or product ideas of varying degrees of fidelity. It allows you to gauge user reactions to something that you haven't fully built out yet, to learn about certain dimensions that you care about. And you can compare a concept or a feature of a concept to something else that already exists or to other potential concepts. And this type of method allows you to learn without having to wait and build. It keeps you from fixating on a one direction too early, reduces risk and avoids the cost of change once you invest in resources, and it leads to creative, grounded iterations of an idea that draws on the strengths of all your concepts. Okay, so cool, right? But how does this actually play out? So I'll give you an example. So even though Duolingo is known for its language learning app, we actually have a wide range of products within the Duolingo brand. And like Alex mentioned, as my background's not only in UX research and human-centered design, but in child-computer interaction and interactive design in children, I get the amazing and fun opportunity to work on Duolingo ABC, Duolingo's new literacy learning app designed for kids ages 3 to 8 to help them learn and love to read. So in the app, child learners go through leveled lessons based on a systematic phonics instructional approach. And the lessons are composed of bite-sized exercises, including, for instance, tracing and identifying beginning sounds of words and matching sounds with letters, and various reading activities. And through these activities and experiences, kids interact with our original characters and original stories. So as you might imagine, when developing a new product like Duolingo ABC and building out new features for that product, we often run into times when all three of these situations I spoke about have come up. And so while grown-ups in kids' lives, like parents and teachers and all the systems that affect kids really matter here, we truly care about kids' experiences. So we involve kids at all stages of our design and development process. So I've been playtesting our product with 3 to 8-year-olds, both in person and remotely, testing ideas and sketches, paper and early prototypes, written content, and the app itself, in addition to just talking with kids and having them tell us what it's like to be a kid right now. And so most recently, we decided to develop some new experiences for 7 to 8-year-olds specifically, which is second grade in the US, but I believe year 3 in the UK. And part of that new experience included having kids work on fluency, or the ability to read accurately with reasonable speed and expression while understanding what is read. And in second grade or year 3, readers should be able to read the same way that they talk and easily use expression and accurate language. So while we already defined the learning outcomes we were aiming for, increasing second graders' fluency skills, and while we had a deep understanding of the context of this type of learning, here effective instructional methods and strategies for helping students improve their fluency skills, we knew that only through iterative prototyping and interacting with kids could we create something usable that kids not only learn from, but also liked. And as a bonus, this approach helped us define kid-first outcomes beyond only the learning goals. It helped us understand the context of fluency practice better from a kid's perspective, and helped us iterate on a design consistently before pushing something out into an experiment to many, many learners. So I'll go over kind of what happened here. So we took an idea based on our curricular goals. So this was just made by our learning scientists in Google Slides, and we prototyped a very bare bones version of it. And kids played with that first version of the game. And so I'll show you how it works. It's a little grainy, so hopefully you'll get the gist still.
Listen closely and tap the words you hear as fast as you can. Press go when you're ready.
Far.
Hard. Harder. Star. Arches. Cartoon.
Forget.
Story.
And after kids played with it, we also asked them what they thought about it. So here's an example of me talking to a child. Can you tell me about that timed game you were playing? What did you think about that one, the Yeti challenge?
It was good. I liked how there was the word farted in it.
You like the word farted in it? Did you like that it was timed, or did you not like that it was timed?
Did not like it.
Why didn't you like it?
The time was just too fast, and how do you beat a challenge?
So it was too fast, and then it wasn't clear how you beat it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think, do you remember the scores you got on it?
Yeah. 10 and 11.
10 and 11. So I think what it is that it's always just trying to beat your high score. Would you want to be able to like beat it all together in some way to know if you won?
Yeah, like try to beat the Yeti.
Like it would be cool if there were like a visual goal.
Yeah. So you want to defeat him.
Yeah.
All right, you might have heard there was a large thunderstorm going on in the background in that one, which is always funny to see or to hear. Okay, so among many other takeaways, as maybe you gleaned from that last clip, it became clear that we needed to make the goal and the time limit clearer in this game to be a better experience for kids. So we went back, we iterated, and we tested again. And so I have some more videos of kids playing.
Yeti challenge.
The words you hear. Get 10 words to get a star. Get ready. You will have 25 seconds. Party.
Party.
Started.
Start.
Farmer.
Farmer.
Artist.
Artist.
Cargo. Corner.
Four.
Forest.
Story.
Start.
Border.
Border.
Star.
Time is up. Yes.
New high school.
And here's another short clip of a child playing.
Oh.
Tap the words you hear. Get 10 words to get a star.
Okay.
Get ready. You will have 25 seconds. Farted. Cargo. Parked.
Wait, what did it say? Park?
Yeah.
No.
Artist.
I heard part.
Star.
Orange. Boring.
Store.
7 out of 10. Try it again, I guess.
All right, and then here's one last clip of a child playing with her mom.
Okay, tap the words you hear.
Get ready.
Get ready, you
You
have
will have 25 seconds.
Okay, let's listen and see if we can get it. Continue. Okay, started. Which one do you think started is? It's the middle one. See, started.
Parked.
Parked. So that says parked, and that says parked.
Park. This one.
Oh, yeah.
Cargo.
Cargo. Good job.
Artist.
Hardest. Oh man.
Time's up.
Oh,
That was like 25 minutes.
it's 25 seconds. Do you want to try again? Okay, play again.
All right, and so maybe clear from that last clip as well that this time when we talked to kids and we saw from these videos, we heard a lot about pressure. The timer was too much pressure, the timer was a lot of pressure. And that was in some cases a negative thing, while other kids said the timer just made me try harder and the time limit made it more really fun. So again, along with a myriad of other takeaways, we felt like we needed to ease the pressure. So our last concept included a lot of changes, including increasing the amount of time to 30 seconds from 25, but not stating it exactly so we could adapt to a kid's level in the future and something we could play with in experiments. We also ended up creating an untimed exercise to counteract the pressure felt by the other challenge, and we similarly went through a concept testing process that led to iterations of this design. And these Yeti challenges are part of an experiment running right now. So we can both evaluate from a learning perspective how they're doing, along with kind of an engagement perspective. And so if you take anything away from this presentation, I hope you can see the value in getting in front of your audience or your users or your learners early and often, and you can see how UXR can help you along the way to boost your impact. And I'll just take a second to plug a little self-promotion. If you're building EdTech for kids and aren't familiar or that experience with methods or conducting research with kids, I recommend checking out this website I worked on with the Joan Gans Cooney Center called playtestwithkids.org, which provides a toolkit with method cards and case studies of child-centered products. And I'm actually speaking on a panel later today, which I think is going to be pretty late tonight for those of you in the UK. But if you want to find out more, you can sign up, and I believe a recording should be released there too. So thank you so much, and I'm excited to have a discussion now.
Fantastic. Really interesting. That it's hypnotizing to watch kids actually play with a product and how they interact with it. It's really, really fascinating. Yeah, great presentation. We got some good reactions, and we have some gaming companies represented here, so I think they're taking careful notes. So we're going to open it up right now to our broader panel. So I want to introduce two new members of the panel, and I'm going to give a quick introduction and then ask them a question just to have them sort of jump in, and then we'll open it up for everybody. So first off is Dr. Saru Ranjan, who is the co-founder of StudyStream. StudyStream is a video platform and online community, allows students to study with each other around the world 24/7 in real time. They've helped, I think, 4 million students, is that right? So far, be productive, be motivated, feel less isolated, and create a global community of students. And Dr. Saru Ranjan is a medical doctor at NHS, which I just think is totally amazing. So that's a really unusual background in EdTech. So my question for you, you come to EdTech from a medical background, and medicine is a field with a lot of very hard metrics, very, very careful research over long periods. StudyStream is really focused on some of these sort of softer psychological benefits, isolation, accountability, motivation, that may be a little bit harder to measure. Why are these behaviors so important? And how did you hone in on this type of product and research as a way to improve educational outcomes?
Yeah, thanks for the intro. Former medic, but thank you. Actually, it's not actually so different. So most medical problems, at least half of them, have a psychological or emotional component. So it's actually not too different. And I guess, like, how did you hone in on this problem? I think I'll compare it to medicine, because you brought up the comparison. Is exactly the same thing. Like, what we do in medicine and what you do as a startup or as a company or in user behavior is exactly the same thing. You want to understand exactly what your user's problem is. You want to understand in depth, and you understand everything that affects it. How do they feel? How do they think? How does it affect your day? What do you need? What does good feel like? What is a successful treatment or successful impact mean for you? So, like, what is a successful journey for a patient to feel better? It's the same things like, how do we make our users actually feel like they feel success and feel like they achieved something and they're part of something. So exactly the same thing. And I think we set out because we realized how so many students were struggling with just feeling motivated, they're isolated. They were like just all over the internet looking for some other people to study with, to get things done, to just get their work done, right? Which I think is what a lot of people here are trying to help with too. And that's kind of how we started, and that's where we began. And it's funny, I use the same things. I think, like, I do loads of user interviews, and I use exactly the same techniques as I did probably as a doctor, which is kind of interesting.
It's really interesting. We have the link to StudyStream in the chat. And then the last member of our panel is Nicole Hemingway-Bratz, who is the head of product at TeachFX. And TeachFX provides AI technology that helps educators see how their instructional practices lead to student talk and increased learning in the classroom. So Nicole, my question for you is, you're looking at sort of communication and more talk as a key output of your product, as a key outcome, as Dr. Sobel just said. How do you think about developing a product and a data system that can measure and increase student talk? How do you know if you're going in the right direction?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, a big component of it is getting data visualizations right in a way that, and I think that that's been a challenge that I underestimated in the beginning, and have since learned that like the data visualizations are key to actually improving student talk in classrooms. And we're specifically looking at, there's sort of two types of student talk that we want teachers to focus on. Or two aspects of student talk we want teachers to focus on. One is what percentage of class is spent with students talking versus not students talking. Because there's ample education research that shows that the more that students are talking in class, the better engaged they are and the better their outcomes are along a number of metrics, from attendance, I apologize, from their attendance data to their testing data. And so step one is to just get teachers to focus on, and this is like a huge step for many teachers, is just getting teachers to create more space for students to talk, period. Many teachers come to our product thinking that what they need to work on is equity of voice, where they're like, oh, I have one student who's talking all the time, and like I can't get half of my students to talk at all. And that's usually the headspace that they're in when they come to our product. And what we want them to take away is not, like, I need to get that, like those students talking less and those students talking more. It's that I need to create more space for all students to talk. And then once you've created the space for talking to occur, then to try to divvy it up more evenly. But really, like the vast majority of our users like would do well to focus on that first step, which is just creating more space and creating more inviting prompts. And much of that, like, it's been fascinating seeing the way that different data visualizations affect the way that teachers understand those problems, like those issues. And it's very like emotionally charged when you're looking at data about your own teaching. Teaching is already a really stressful profession. There are a lot of pressures on teachers already. And so then to receive further data about sort of like how things are going can feel very intimidating, or intimidating is often a feeling that teachers are coming to us with. And so sort of creating this, there's a lot of work that we do in the design process, in the onboarding process as teachers are signing up, in a lot of our copy and a lot of our marketing, where we're really trying to create a safe space for you to be vulnerable about data that might be hard to look at, because like it's not uncommon for a teacher to make their first TeachFX recording and get data about the dialogue in their classroom, the discourse in their classroom, and to realize that their students talk for less than 10% of the class. Like single-digit student talk metrics is quite common for a first recording. And so how do we sort of soften the impact of that first sort of reality check?
Yeah, really interesting. I love that idea of sort of what percentage of the class is open to student time as a baseline metric, and something that everybody can hone in on. I wanted to take one of the questions from the chat as a start as well. So this is a question for you, Lal, and others can weigh in as well. You know, the participant, actually, do you want to, Megan, would you like to just come off mute for a moment and ask your question? I know it was a few minutes ago.
Yeah, sure. I asked two questions. I'm assuming you're talking about the first one.
Yes.
Learning about tracking tools. So for us, we are a startup. We're in gaming EdTech. And one of the challenges is finding tools that are not going to make us bankrupt already. So what are some of the fun tools that we can use to track user behavior? I appreciate that, of course, our gaming engine might be a little bit different. So we might not be able to use things like Hotjar, but anything anyone in this panel has in terms of tips on what tools we could use to track user behavior and player behavior would be great. Thank you.
Lal, why don't we start with you and then others can weigh in?
Yeah, I think I'll probably give quite an unhelpful answer, and then other people can give more helpful answers. So yeah, I think Kylie articulated really well, and I would 100% echo that. If you can get your product in front of some kids or in front of whoever the intended user is and see how they use it, I've always found that really powerful across all of our projects. What we did with Hegarty Maths, so we didn't really have as much time to do that, is we actually didn't really use anything fancy in terms of observation tracking. We just asked them to pull all of their data and metrics of where people were clicking on their website, what people were using. And we just went through it and zoned in on, well, it's kind of interesting that only 10% of kids watch the videos, and you think that the videos are a core part of the platform. And you've built this new tool, and the usage of it does not look high. Maybe that's where we'll focus. I know we're increasingly trying to move into the kind of observation tracking space on some of our projects. We've got some in-house tools, but I think probably other people on the call will have more practical responses to that part of the question.
Does somebody else want to weigh in?
Can I just ask a clarification? Do you mean when they're physically in school to monitor them, or do you mean on your product? I think I missed that.
We mean on our product. We are going to start launching to schools in October, but we just want to make sure we do the right testing. But as a mode of also tracking in future, which we've done, I've done it before with e-commerce products. It would be great to do something with this game as well.
Yeah, I think I can give a kind of short answer. I think yeah, it depends on what kind of question you want to answer, right? I think if it's if you're just trying to get feedback or trying to understand more about user behavior, or I'd probably just list it as what is the most important question I'm trying to answer right now? Is it that I don't understand how kids are going to use this in school? And then I'd go down exactly what Kylie did, right? That's usually what we do, which is go in and just put the hands of users. I think you don't need to I don't think you need to talk to 100 users to get the first pieces of information, right? You can just talk to 5 or 10. You can choose your number, but you can start with 5. And after you talk to, you'll notice, I've done this so many times that you end up after the first 5, you already know you already know what people are going to say. So you kind of you got your first set of information, then you can switch what you're doing a little bit, go out and speak to another 5, switch your information a bit, go out to another 5 and switch your information a bit. And I think that's how you can probably iterate quickly and actually move quickly to iterate your product and learn stuff. And I think and then the second thing is how do you actually get broad data analytics, I think is what you're asking, once you actually launch. And there's loads of tools that I kind of hard to answer because there's so many, and I don't know what your tech stack is and all that kind of stuff, but there are loads of tools, and depends on Mixpanel or whatever, Amplitude, and there's so many different products you could probably use for that more wider piece if you have loads of data. But it's probably that's probably a second step after you've done the first step, I'd say. If I understood the question correctly.
Yeah. I think we should move on from this, but I agree. There's really a growing library of different interesting UX research tools that are coming out at different price points for different types of companies and users. But you have to sort of stay on top of it because there are new ones all the time. It's really interesting to do various different specific things. So this is a question for I want to go around the room because I think this is such an interesting topic. When people think about impact in education, often their minds immediately go to things like, grade increases, test scores, getting questions correct or incorrect on a quiz or on some kind of measure, that type of sort of standard assessment. But when we think here, we're talking about sort of behavioral metrics, and which can be far more nuanced, but can then relate to those assessment metrics. We saw an example in what Lal showed about, more people click on the videos that can lead to higher scores down the road. I'd love to hear each of you talk about sort of the relationship between behavioral metrics like, motivation or talk in classroom and the metrics that can maybe be easier to explain down the road about, increases in actual outcomes. Let me start. Nicole, can I start with you?
Relationship between behavioral metrics and, can you
Behavioral metrics and sort of standard educational assessment metrics, like does talk lead to higher grades or better student outcomes?
Yeah, well, you sort of set me up to talk about one of my favorite things that we've done at TeachFX. So when when COVID hit, our product was entirely designed for the K-12 in-person classroom, and so we were wholly unprepared for going online, and sort of took a few months to decide like, are we really going to do something online, or are we like, sort of, what is our strategy here? Are we about to build out an online product? So we built a Zoom integration and a Microsoft Teams integration, which automatically recorded all online classes for our teachers, and automatically produced class reports. This created a number of different design problems, because then one, it was like awesome that then we can make the default setting recording, whereas previously we'd lived in this world where the default setting was not recording because the teacher needed to hit the record button. And so that we had done a lot of work sort of getting teachers to hit record, and then that was not relevant in the online learning environment. The pace of receiving data was very different. The amount of data was totally different. And so it no longer made sense to have like a full report every time you recorded. It made sense to have like a trends report, like this is what last week looked like. Nobody wanted to look at every single class's data set. And so this gave us an incredible amount of data about what online learning looked like in our partner schools. In a couple of our partner districts, they actually were able to give us their test score data, and on an individual student level basis. That was another
Wow.
really big difference in the online learning environment, was that we could have individual student audio streams. And so we could actually say, like, Leandro spoke for exactly this many seconds in class. And then we could map, like, how did that student's talk correlate to their test score outcomes at the end of the year. So that was just like this is probably, I'm not sure what the like generalized takeaway is here. But that that data set was just incredibly validating of what education research had pointed to for decades, that student talk leads to better learning outcomes. Yeah. But it gave us an amount of like a scale of data proving that point. And we just saw across the board, the students who spoke more, it was incredibly highly correlated that the students who spoke more in their online classes did better across every state testing subject area. And so that was, we're currently working on trying to get this data, like an academic study done on this data set. Stay tuned. But that was like just a really neat example of, oh, and that we also had a control group for the first time. That previously we'd only ever had data about teachers who hit record. So the teachers who were already committed to this concept of student talk being important. Whereas in this online learning environment, all classes were being recorded regardless of whether you had ever created a TeachFX account or ever heard of us. And so we were able to compare data. I like want to pull up, I know I have it in like a paper on my desk, that I believe it was like BIPOC students were twice as spoke about on average twice as much if their teacher was a TeachFX user versus not. Wow. We finally had data showing that when teachers received data about the equity of voice in their classroom and who was doing the talking, that they made changes to improve it. And that was incredibly validating of just everything that we're working on at TeachFX. But that's my
really fascinating, amazing data to have, and another silver lining of the pandemic. There's been so many in EdTech. Kylie, I'd love to send the same question to you, which is, you have all this behavioral data. How do you connect it to the sort of traditional student outcomes in a way that can be convincing for parents and teachers and get everybody excited?
Yeah, this had me thinking about a lot of different things, like just around like values and perspective. So I think for me, well, the first thing I think, especially with EdTech, is you can't have learning without engagement. So, which is sometimes a tension, right? Like, it's a balance of how much you want to try and nudge your learners to be on a system. But so I think that in terms of like some very simple behavioral insights or metrics, like making sure that action is happening will be the first step to know that learning is happening. For me, you know, coming from a fairly academic background, I've always thought about learning as not just sort of like these pre-post tests and something that needs to be measurable, but really thinking about learning holistically around action and interaction and from sort of like a learner's perspective. So learning is social, learning is contextualized. So that's why it's important that we think about like all of the aspects around the learning besides just the content going from here to there. And so that's how we often think about learning. I think with Duolingo ABC is like learning is play, learning is exploration, learning, especially with younger kids, that's always the case. So I think that's usually, I think the way that I think about it, it's intrinsically motivated. So it's around like defining what the kind of outcomes you want beyond the learning content itself that all impact that goal.
Do you end up tying the output of Duolingo ABC to like Lexile level or any of the sort of standardized reading assessments?
Yeah, so we had an external company run an efficacy study, and so there was both changes in like standardized measures around reading, but also we wanted to measure like how often kids were asking to read, right, outside of that, right? So there are other kind of impacts outside of that could also lead, right? Because it's just a tool is just one in a big tool kit, right? And so it's seeing how other kind of impacts are happening as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of that motivation, I'd love to pass it to you, Dr. Ranjan Saru. You have this product that brings people together around studying, big communities, motivating, accountability, people, show up for study groups and all that kind of thing. Really important behavioral metrics. How do you think about the sort of down the road output of that? Do students, how does the behavior drive outcomes?
Yeah, I think, it's a really, really interesting question. And I think, for everyone listening, I think it is for them to think about their own product. It's like, what is the core thing I'm trying to do for my user, right? Like, what's the core thing I'm trying to achieve for us? I don't want to say, the specific outcomes that matter, because they do, but the reason people are coming to StudyStream or to our product is they struggle to stay motivated. They struggle to actually complete a study session or to do, to sit down for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. It's very similar to what Kylie was saying, like the actual doing it, the engagement, they struggle to do the thing. And so they're coming to StudyStream. They want to get good grades, right? That's the final outcome. That's kind of where they're coming. They want to revise, they want to study or do whatever they want to do. But they're specifically coming to us because they need us to help them spend time doing it, right? We're actually helping them spend, like, for them, success is like, I used to be able to study 20 minutes and then I went to Netflix or something. And now it's like, wow, I can actually study 3 hours a day now. And I find it fun, right? And I want to keep doing it. And so, and I think that's an important part, right? And I think Kai's saying it's about being fun and wanting to do it. And that's the most important thing, because if you solve those things, then people want to keep coming back because it's fun and they keep wanting doing it and keep wanting to do it. And then they do well and they keep wanting to have more fun and they keep wanting to do it even more. In fact, I don't really care what parents think or anyone else thinks, like, because our kids, if the kids are finding it fun, or students find it fun and they want to come back, and we're making it long, they come back for longer, within reason, right? Not outrageous times, but within a reasonable amount of time every day, and they're finding it enjoyable. That for me is a success metric. And I think that's important, right? They feel successful, right? Because they feel, I achieved this, like in my last week, I did this many sessions, I feel successful. I actually don't care what the outcome is, because I know they're trying to do work, they're trying to do well. And so for them, that's success. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter how they, in a way, they're competing with themselves, right? Like, as long as they're doing the best for them, it doesn't matter how they do compared to everyone else. And I think that for us is the most important thing. So I don't think for now, like, I never ask people what grades they get or like anything like that. And I don't think it's important. As long as they're achieving the best thing for them, I think that's what matters.
Yeah, really, really interesting. It makes sense. And just back around to you, Lal, you mentioned in your keynote this idea of, opening a help video as a behavioral metric, but then it feeds down the line to second attempt accuracy and first attempt accuracy on future questions. And you've mentioned studying schools in the past. How do you think about that sort of flow through of how do you target a behavior that will have educational impact?
Yeah, so I think like my ideal study would always be, I've come up with an intervention which is trying to shift X or Y or Z behavior, and then maybe we've got some in-platform metrics where we can see like quickly, does it look like something's going on? But then, as Nicole was mentioning, right, it's amazing if you can have a control group and a randomized control trial and link it all the way through to those kind of longer term test score outcomes. But I also, wouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and you can't always do that. So I'll give an example of another project which I worked on recently, is that during the kind of post-pandemic here in the UK, in terms of learning recovery and catch-up, the government's flagship response was to put money towards tutoring, which is a very well evidenced kind of solution for learning and catch-up. And we worked on a project to try and improve pupil attendance at their tutoring sessions. And one of the things that we did to try and help with that is that we built this website, kind of very, very low tech, very basic website called Snap Survey, which was all about trying to give tutors a tool to use with their pupils in the very first session, to just let them both quickly answer the same quiz and see what they have in common. And we got really good feedback from process evaluation work, kind of interviews we did with kids and tutors as to how that was. So that was encouraging. And then we saw in our data for a randomized control trial that we improved pupil attendance at their tutoring sessions, which is great. And we weren't able to link it all the way through to grades, but for that study, that was kind of good enough for me, right? If the kids aren't at the tutoring session, there's no way they can possibly be benefiting from the tutoring. So I think the point here is maybe to kind of think about what's your theory of change for how your product or service is going to improve learning outcomes, and is what you're doing hitting something within it. And so to me, it's relatively clear that if a kid isn't turning up to tutoring, there's no way they can benefit. And it echoes what Kylie was saying as well, right? There's no learning without engagement. So if you're doing something that is improving engagement, then it's probably a good thing. As long as you're not in the you've not made people study for 12 hours a day, but I think that's pretty unlikely.
It'd be a good problem to have, perhaps. So, one thing that I think is interesting about all of your different projects is that in education and edtech in general, you have sort of two different flavors. There's captive audiences, like students who are in school, or college students who are in classes and have a sort of structure around them, and then students out in the world who when they're not actually in an educational environment, are they engaging in edtech? So something like Duolingo is almost always done in the wild. I would imagine Study Stream is sort of in between. It's people are in school, but it's when they're at home and they have Netflix tempting them. I'd love to hear, a few of you have mentioned nudging and the idea of how can you get people back to repeat a behavior and reach out to them and sort of remind them to do something. And I think it's related to everybody here, maybe to TeachFX a little less, but I'm sure it's relevant. So let me start with you, Kylie. Can you talk to our audience a little bit about nudge theory and sort of that behavioral economic world and how you think about it as a user researcher?
Yeah, I think Duolingo definitely is involved in this, because they're all about gamified learning, right? So all of the sort of bells and whistles around the learning is intended to help you come back. So we have leaderboards and a streak and all those kind of things surrounding it that kind of bring you back every day. I would say it gets a little more complicated when you're getting with kids, right? Not only because younger learners, not only because they don't understand necessarily the same kind of what it means to come back every day or something like that, but also because they aren't necessarily always in control of their own device usage, which makes it a kind of more complicated problem. So I think at the heart of it, at least when I'm with a product like Duolingo ABC, we really want to focus on, as much as possible, intrinsic motivation. So not only is not only do you want to come back every day because in Duolingo ABC, there's a new daily joke that you could read with your parent or on your own, but also like you feel strongly, or a child feels strongly, that the stories are engaging and fun, that they actually want to do the next thing. And so it's sort of a mix, I would say. And for Duolingo as well, is that the content itself, where you spend 90% of your time, has to be engaging and be intrinsically motivating. But then you use gamified learning theories around that to know that sometimes you need a little extra push or social interaction to really get you on to come back the next day to continue that routine. And so I think it's about routinizing, I think, your engagement.
Do you push a little reminder to people saying the daily joke is ready, or do you hope that they will internalize it?
So we do have pushes for a daily joke. Again, it's like a complicated thing, right? Because is it the child's device? Is it the parent's device? Who's getting it? We have emails that get sent out to parents as well. So it's a complicated situation when we're talking about at home or direct to consumer use for a learning product in that way. But I think, the Joan Gans Cooney Center, they have a report about joint media engagement. So how kids and parents can use, tech and media together. And one of the principles of that is really like making your products fit within the context of family's home and making them work for them. So we don't ever want to be like, you have to play now, because we don't know the situation, especially at home, because we're not within a constrained, structured environment.
So Saru, how about you are trying to encourage people to come back and study, which they may not be intrinsically motivated to do on their own. How do you think about nudging?
Yeah, I mean, well, Duolingo are the champions of this in the EdTech space. So I think Kylie said some good stuff, but yeah, it's kind of similar. Where a lot of it is, I guess, two things. That the thing we're trying to do is help them achieve what they want to achieve, right? So a lot of it is focused around how do you get you to do a good study session every day, or like not every day, like 4 or 5 times a week, right? Which is what most of our students want. And so a lot of our kind of nudges around like visualization. So how are you seeing those sessions? Like, similar, we have a streak system as well, similar, which is like kind of improving your like the more you engage with the platform, the more you kind of bought in and want to come back. Something unusual, which I think is actually a massive pull factor, is just the way our system's set up. So when you come in, you're starting with loads of people. Initially, you're brand new, but then as you come back, you become more familiar. And it's those people you meet along the way that bring you back, because you get to know more people, you're more ingrained in the community, you get to know, as you meet more people, make more connections, you have the sense like, oh, everyone else is kind of studying and doing things, and I want to go and see these new people, and I've seen them before. And so you kind of systematically get more bought in, the more we kind of help you see the value in what we're doing, or like kind of show you those things. I think the hardest thing about this is doing it in a way that's value add for the user, because I think it can be really easy to just shoot off a notification here, or like an email here, or like one that's ping you every day and tell you like come back and study or something random like that. And I think it's actually easier to come up with ideas about what to do. It's much harder to know, should I be doing this, because this could really piss off my users, or this might actually just annoy them. But like I've done one app like just to see what it was like in EdTech, and it was pinging me like 3 times a day. I was getting 3 notifications a day saying like come back or something, like you're ready, something. I can't remember what you were saying, but I was getting so annoyed. I was like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe they're doing this to all the users. But it can go really wrong. So I think that is like, it's important to do stuff for metrics, but not just for metrics sake, right? You have to kind of believe that it's actually going to be useful on the long term. So yeah, I think it's more about knowing what not to do, because I think most people know kind of, there's definitely things you can try to, notifications and emails and pings and visualization and all those kind of things.
Absolutely. And so Lal, you sort of evoked Thaler, and I noticed, in your East framework, you consider social one of the drivers, and that when you go to the study stream website, it says 900 people, 1,000 people are studying right now. That's that's a sort of an interesting social nudge. I'd love to hear you think about behavioral insights and behavioral economics a lot. Just how might the startup and gaming founders in this room think about nudging and not irritating their users, but getting them motivated?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, if we're not careful, I'll claim that basically everything is a nudge. So I'll try and constrain myself a little bit and say, yeah, I think Duolingo Streak is like obviously a great use case of this. You see Teacher Tap, which is aimed at teachers in the UK and tries to get them to answer a question every day. And they very similarly have they have streaks, they have badges, and you see like teachers on Edu Twitter, they'll just be like talking about it all the time. It's like a real source of pride. So I think, these things, when carefully and properly designed, can be really effective. I'll maybe share another example of a piece of work that we've done, which is kind of in this reminder space, not getting people to come back to a product, but trying to get kids to come back to school. So we ran this project before the pandemic, sending text messages to parents, letting them know how many days of school their child has missed, and just expressing that really clearly in a very positively written message. And we found in a randomized control trial that we were able to improve school attendance, and we're looking to run an even larger trial soon, hopefully, to check that result still holds and we can replicate it. And yeah, I think the points around being careful with the frequency and tone of your reminders are really important. So I think I can remember on a project a few years ago, we wrote what we thought was a really nice message about supporting pupil attendance to the parents of kids who had 100% attendance. And we got a negative reaction to that, because even though we felt it was a really nice message, they were basically like, why are you contacting me at all? My kid's attendance is 100%. And so we very much learned from that. And in the future iterations of the program, we've only messaged people who are below 95% attendance. So I think you do sometimes have to learn these things the hard way, but I think it is also important to be like, more notifications is not necessarily better. And I think you do see some apps do this, in my opinion, quite badly. Anyone who's ever used Tinder and then stopped using Tinder, their notifications get increasingly desperate to get you back onto the app. But I mean, I'm sure they've A/B tested them, so in general, they probably do work. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Desperation not a good look for EdTech apps. So Nicole, you were saying it is totally relevant to you. Tell us about how TeachFX thinks about nudging.
Yeah, so I'm actually really eager to answer this, because I in listening to everyone else's responses, I'm realizing how different it is when you are selling to schools. So we sell to schools, and our end users are teachers. So a typical contract might be a principal or a superintendent buys our product for all of their teachers, and then the teachers use the product. And so I think a big part of this for us is tapping into the social systems that exist in schools already. That there are a lot of cultural either barriers or boosters to usage that are embedded in the social systems of schools. So the relationship between teachers and principals is it's an employer-employer, like there's an employer-employee aspect to it. There's a sort of a compliance aspect in the relationship. There are instructional coaches who fit into this as well, and have this sort of different seat and are perceived differently by teachers and principals. And all of the stakeholders have different goals or anxieties or like visions of what successful product usage would look like on TeachFX. And so we have really focused on tapping into that system. And so like getting, we have sort of our preliminary strategy, so we're figuring out how it scales, is to do synchronous workshops with our teachers so get all of our teacher users from a school into a Zoom room or into a physical room, get them to talk about how what their goals are for their teaching, how TeachFX will help them meet those goals, get them to verbalize that, because we're very much like, we practice what we preach. When you say it aloud, you learn it. And so creating an actual social, not creating a social space, we are tapping into a social space that already exists. And so trying to get peers to talk to each other about how they're going to use the product. And that's really unique to the situation where the users of our product know each other and they are coworkers, they see each other every day. And so then how can you get them to verbalize the goals for TeachFX in a way that will encourage others to try it out, or to continue recording, or to think about, if they don't get it, that they're not sure how to piece it into their teaching practice, that they get ideas from others around them through the social process.
Yeah. I think the social network within education is so dense, and it's a really interesting place to sort of help. There's parents and children, there's schools and administrators, there's teachers and children, there's so many relationships that you can, and students and other students, that you can sort of use and think about and build into motivation. And so I wanted to ask about, one thing that comes up about in behavioral research is that people have a lot of theories about how people will react to certain ideas. You mentioned the concept testing, Kylie, and it's if will the timer stress them out, or will they love it? And it's hard to I'm sure each person has an idea. Oh, well, I would love it, or I would hate it, so I think the kids will love it or hate it. I'd love to ask each of you, just in a quick round robin, can you tell us about an insight that you've uncovered through your work that sort of was counterintuitive, that disproved what people internally might have said? Just because I think that can be a moment that is a real proof point for the power of user research and behavioral insights. Everybody thought this would happen. I guess, Lal, your example of sending 100% attendance people, and they say, no, why are you talking to me at all? That's pretty counterintuitive to me. I'd love to hear others talk about that, just because it's such an interesting moment when it happens. Everybody's thinking. Yeah, Nicole, go ahead.
I got one. So something that we learned at TeachFX is something I learned is how much teachers love qualitative data. That there's already an existing culture around how teachers are expected to look at quantitative data, and there's already this sort of a culture of fear around quantitative data because of No Child Left Behind, and so quantitative data has a lot of social barriers to effective usage in schools because of the social systems that are in place. And so our most loved sort of data visualization is a word cloud of, these are the words that you said the most in this class. These are the words that your students said the most in this class. And it's just been incredible seeing the way that teachers use that qualitative data, and they just love it. It has a warmth and a love to it that is just categorically different than how the quantitative data is approached.
That's a great one. When people build products, I think teachers are going to want charts and graphs about every number and every.
We have the numbers. Give them the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about does somebody else want to go off mute and jump in? Is there something that surprised you?
Yeah, I can go. So one of the things that we tried with Peggotty Maps, very much inspired by Duolingo, is I was saying we should definitely try a streak, definitely try a streak. Top idea. And we did try a streak, and we found that, at least at the time that we tested it, it didn't work, which was super surprising to me. I think that it was likely more about the way we designed the streak, that we didn't get the design quite right. I'm still a big believer in streaks generally, and Duolingo, I've got all the research on it. But that was one where I was the game of running research and testing nudges does make you very humble. And that was one of my humbling moments where I'd sort of said we'll do a streak and it'll be great. And it wasn't, at least initially. I think we probably didn't get the design quite right.
Yeah. Sometimes things don't port from context to context. Well,
Yeah.
I don't want to, put anybody on the spot. Carly, do you have one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this happens a lot when working with kids, right? They do things exactly the opposite that I feel like that sometimes you intend. And so how I like to think about it is actually to lean into that a lot of the time. So an example, not actually from Duolingo, but from some of my dissertation work, was that I was designing an application where part of it involved kids taking pictures together, like selfies, two kids, to help them cooperate. And so part of that I thought would be to help kids understand their physical space and make sure that both of their faces were in the picture, right? And so that would count as inclusive participation if both kids' faces are in the picture. So I created a prototype, I was testing it, and time and time again, what was most fun about playing this game was not putting your faces in the picture, talking to each other, putting their faces outside of the picture, putting their hands over the camera. And then I realized, okay, like the problem isn't that they're not following what I want them to do. The problem is that I am not defining what counts as inclusion and participation in a way that's meaningful to the kids I'm working for. So it was a pretty funny thing where where it was not at all what I expected, but I think I love to lean into those moments to kind of like make the experience the most meaningful for the people you're working for.
Yeah.
Or designing for.
That's a great one. Yeah. So you almost baked the bias into the metric. It's like, I think they're going to put their faces on it, so that's what I'm going to count. And then they had so much fun doing something totally different, but it's a great learning experience. Saru,
I'm trying to think. I think I'm basically wrong on a daily basis, but I'm trying to think of an easy to explain answer, but I can't. So unfortunately, nothing I can explain in 30 seconds. But yeah, I can say generally wrong every day, so that can be good.
Yeah, being wrong is enough times, and you eventually get something right. I wanted to ask, the model of sort of identifying a core outcome and then coming up with different possible interventions is really a through line, I think, of all of your work. And I think, for people who are relatively new to behavioral insights or user research, or, just have a new startup and they're figuring it out, I'd love, do you have any advice about how to sort of define that target behavior that is the sort of the one thing you really want them to be doing, as much as possible? Is it, how can they break down their own products and decide what areas of the product they're trying to optimize for? And let me start actually with you, Lal. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, I think a good way to think about this can be to sort of sketch out the theory of change for basically how do you think that your product is going to improve learning? Like, what are all the things that happen from someone going to the website or going to the app to this kind of like final learning outcome that you'd really like to see, and thinking about, what's the absolute best thing to happen along the way. And you might actually, when you often like start drawing out a theory of change, they can get quite large. So then maybe once you've got that, thinking about what's actually the most important through line, what's the most significant through line. So I think in our work with Heggerty Maths, what we saw is that their most important through line was the kids watch these instructional videos and then they do the quiz and they've learned something. And that's when we were then like, okay, we'll focus on trying to improve the watching of the videos. So yeah, I'd recommend that kind of fear of change and thinking about like, what are the absolute most important actions within the platform.
How about you, Nicole? Well, how do you identify that core outcome?
Well, I think that a common mistake that is made in identifying the outcome is thinking too small about it. I think that one, OKRs are awesome and everyone should have them and bake them into their processes. And I say that because OKRs force you to focus on what are the actual metrics that if we hit these 5 metrics, nothing else matter. We are fine. We will do well. We will raise our next round. We'll be able to recruit. We'll do all the things. And it's if you can get together 3 to 10 metrics where you can confidently say, like, if these metrics are good, then like everything, like it's fine if other metrics are like on fire. And then once you have those core metrics about like defining the company's success, then you can take it from there to define like, well, okay, so then under each of those outcomes that I'm looking to achieve, what are the sub outcomes that I believe will get us to the greater outcome? And then if you see that those sub outcomes aren't actually moving the greater outcome, then you can just trash the sub outcomes. Like you don't need to be married to them. But if you can put together good OKRs and good, like really high level, like what do we need as a company outcomes, that will make everything, simplify everything.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Kylie, Duolingo has so much A/B testing going on. How do people identify the core outcomes? What are they trying? How do they know what they're trying to drive in each of these Duolingo products?
Yeah, I mean, what Lal and Nicole were saying resonates with me. Certainly, like OKRs are a big part of our company as well, and then it's taking those higher goals and then coming up with those sub outcomes. And I think for me, from a UXR perspective, it's about following a user journey. And so how do we imagine that experience, that through line, and then also bringing, not defining that ourselves, but bringing in our learners to make sure that our mental model of that matches what theirs is. And then also really basing, as much as possible, basing our metrics on learning theories of learning. So we have a whole learning scientist function. UXR has, background in social psychology, human-centered design. And so taking both of those, marrying them together, I think creates a fairly accurate pathway, but also one that can continually change. I think you can't always have it perfect, and it's okay for it to shift.
So all about sort of finding that journey, all the different parts. I'm hearing that from multiple people. And then where are the levers, what are the behaviors along that you think you really can pull or that were most important to pull? Saru, how about you? How do you think about, in your particular context, how do you think about the outcomes you're trying to drive? Is it about showing up and study time? Is there anything inside there that you're trying to make happen? Collaboration?
Yeah.
I'm curious how you think about it.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of agree with what everyone said, and I think it's about having that underlying, what is the main metric or main thing you're trying to do? Whether it be like revenue, retention, engagement, whatever. Like everyone has a different thing, and I think you're talking about the core behavior. I think it basically depends on what stage you are as a company or an organization. If you're an early product and you don't really know what's going to happen, like you have a theory, you have theories, you're like, oh, I think, I want my users to do this, or I want them to do this, and this is what I think is going to happen. Then you kind of, you map out what you think is the steps that your users are going to take to get there, and you put it out, you talk to users, you keep testing and hope that it works. And then hopefully at some point you get to a point where it's working, and then you kind of shift into, I still believe this, but what else is happening? Like, what else are my users doing? What other behaviors are they doing? What other things should I be looking at? And is that core behavior changing? Am I looking at the right things? So I think it really depends where you are. I think at the beginning, you're kind of trying to set the kind of, you're trying to choose a path, and then you start learning. The further down you go the path, you start learning more and more. And then you're always trying to figure out, how can I drive the core behavior that's going to improve my metric the most? And that might change. Hopefully it stays the same if your theory was right, maybe the theory is wrong, or maybe you learn new things. But yeah, it's kind of ever evolving. And so it really depends what stage you're at in that journey down the road.
Fantastic.
Up the road to the mean.
Up. Right. So we've talked about a lot of different topics, and I think we're coming on time now, but and just to summarize a couple of them really quickly, how to choose these metrics that are perfect, the levers along the user journey that you can actually pull, when and how to use nudges, why not to over nudge. We've talked about how to make sure that you're concept testing and thinking about different ways to move those levers and testing them as many as you can, and how to tie in those behavioral metrics to sort of educational metrics down the road. And sometimes when you don't need to, and maybe showing up is the end in and of itself, especially in education. This has been a great panel. I really appreciate all the work you're doing and everything we're doing. Hege, let me pass it back to you at Brighteye, and thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I can only echo that. Thank you to the whole panel, and an amazing wrap by you as well, Alex. So I'm not going to add any more to that. I'll definitely watch the recording when I can focus completely, because it's a lots of new stuff for me to learn here. Want to thank everyone in the audience. Good questions. Hope you've learned as well as I have. We've got one more day of the Brighteye EdTech Startup Festival. Tomorrow we're looking at funding and governance. So hopefully we'll see some of you there as well. And for now, just want to wish everyone a good rest of your Thursdays, and see you all. Thanks.